So here we are back by popular demand. You guys have been asking and asking for a part 2 of reacting to my subscribers' hamster cages. So I went ahead and asked you guys on the YouTube community tab to send me pictures of your enclosures to give you guys constructive criticism. And I got 350 emails of cages to go through. So of course I can't show all of those cages in this video, so I did have to go ahead and choose different cages because I just can't show 350 cages. Please keep in mind that the bare minimum for a hamster cage is 450 square inches of floor space. Anything less would be considered unsuitable because it has been proven that small cages do have negative effects on hamsters. So the first cage we have here is a fur plus cage with 330 square inches of floor space, and they have a Syrian hamster named Daisy living in it. I first want to say that Daisy is absolutely adorable and I love her fur coloring as well as I love her name. I think it's really adorable. I do have to say that you are going to need to upgrade your cage because it is under the bare minimum, and especially for a Syrian they need a lot of room. I do also want to mention bedding depth. Hamsters are burrowers, so it is really important we try to give them as much bedding as possible. I would recommend a minimum of 6 inches of bedding because then it gives them the ability to actually burrow. And the last thing I do want to mention is the wheel size. I think the wheel in there comes with the cage and I'm pretty sure it is a 6 or 7 inch wheel. Keep in mind, because you do have a Syrian, they're going to need at least an 8-inch wheel or else it can cause back problems. Most Syrians actually will end up needing an 11-inch wheel. The next enclosure we have here is a 40-gallon breeder tank with a female Syrian living in it. I want to say good job at providing a 40-gallon aquarium, as well as it looks like you've gotten a nice sized wheel in there for her, as well as some good bedding depth. You've also included a sand bath, which is great. The only thing maybe I would suggest is some more types of hides up on the top of the bedding. I find that when you put more things for them to hide under, they're more likely to burrow, but other than that I don't have too much of constructive criticism. The next enclosure we have here is a wire cage with a Syrian living in it. I do know you said that your hamster keeps climbing on the bars. I do want to point out that this cage is too small, especially for a Syrian. If you take a look at the wheel, your hamster isn't going to be able to even really run on it because their back is going to be curving so much. I've seen a lot of these cages before. They really are not suitable for hamsters in any way. So the best option would be for you to upgrade your cage. Then you can give your hamster a proper sized wheel as well as more bedding. The wire level also really isn't safe unless you were to cover it with cardboard, because a hamster walking on wire and mesh all the time can actually cause bumblefoot. So I really would suggest upgrading your cage. So this enclosure here has about 600 square inches of floor space, and I think they've made this enclosure themselves and they have a Syrian living in it. I first want to say I really like the cage and how it's made. I like the door on the side and how it is up high because then you are able to put a lot of bedding, as well as the little viewing panel is really nice because then you could see your hamster burrowing possibly. I also want to say that your Syrian hamster is super adorable. Something that I would maybe add, because I do know you said he started to rip up the plastic tube, is maybe get some wooden tunnels instead, or you could possibly get some of those wooden half tunnels, or cork logs would work great, and you can put those into the bedding as a burrow starter, and those can work great as well for tunnels. So this next enclosure houses one male dwarf hamster, which they are unsure on the species. He most likely is a Russian Campbell's, possibly a hybrid, and he lives in a cage with 204 square inches. So the first thing I do have to suggest is upgrading his cage because it is under the bare minimum. I do know there is a level in the cage, but unfortunately when it comes to hamster cages, levels don't really count towards floor space, they count more so towards enrichment. I do like all of the little hanging toys you've included, like the little carrots that attach onto the wire there, but that is one of the biggest things I would recommend is upgrading the cage, and then that way you can add in some more bedding and everything. So the next cage we have here is a 105 quart bin with a Russian dwarf hamster living in it. I do like that you've chosen to do a bin cage because they're great cheap options for hamsters. One thing that I would suggest is providing a bit more bedding. I recommend at least 6 inches in a section. That way your hamster can properly burrow because it is really important for them to be able to. I also do notice the wheel. I do know that is the 4-inch, I think it's the 4.5-inch silent spinner. For any dwarf hamster, we want to give them at least a 6-inch wheel because a 4-inch can actually bend a dwarf's back. I do like the homemade items you went ahead and made, and I think they are really creative. So the next enclosures we have here are for 2 dwarf hamsters. They're living in separate tanks, and the tanks are 53 gallons. So I really like the size of the tanks. They're actually very, very tall, so this actually gives you the opportunity to be able to give them a really deep substrate. So that is one of the things that I would suggest, is giving them at least 6 inches to be able to burrow in. You can make some platforms so that you can put the wheel on so that it's not getting stuck under bedding. You can make easy little platforms like this. This is just made from cardboard. It has a little bit of some legs added onto it. You just put this on top of the bedding and then put the wheel, and it makes a sturdy surface for the wheel to sit on. So the next enclosure we have here is an IKEA Dwarf, and they did say it's not fully done yet, but they have asked me what sort of toys they should add in, and one thing that I would say I would probably add onto the left side is a really nice cork log. This would add to the natural side that you have going on, and it would be a really nice tunnel and great climbing toy for them. So this enclosure is a 55-gallon aquarium with a male dwarf hamster living in it. So I really like the size of it, and I also like you've given the option of a water dish or a water bottle. That's great. You're letting your hamster choose. Some things that I would recommend is adding more bedding into the enclosure so then he can burrow more. Another thing that probably would benefit him is adding in a sand bath. I don't think I see one in here, but if you don't have one, I would definitely recommend adding one in so then he can dig in it or bathe in it if he wants to. So this next cage here I wanted to include in the video because in their country they don't have a lot of variety in cages, so they actually went ahead and made a DIY cage with 504 square inches of floor space, and they have a male Campbell's hamster living in it. So this can kind of give you an idea. You guys can make your own DIY cages if you don't have a suitable one in your country. I do like that they've given a bunch of different substrate options. I think one thing that I would add is another hideout that they can actually go and hide in, because I only really see one at the top there, so I'd probably add one at the bottom. So the next cage that we have here is for their short-haired Syrian. On the right is a 22-gallon bin cage, and on the left is a single-leveled critter trail cage. So I would actually suggest filling the bin cage up with more bedding. I do notice you don't have any in there, which I would put a lot more. Syrians especially do need quite a lot of bedding to burrow in. You could probably move the wheel into the critter trail and then just fill the bin up really high, and you could move the water bottle to the critter trail as well. And you could also add some more hides in there then when you put more bedding. So the next cage we have here is one that I actually recognize. I reviewed it in my last cage reaction video. I do have to say it is not a suitable sized hamster cage. I do know you said you can fit a lot of bedding, but the most bedding it can really fit is probably 4 inches. And when in reality we want to be providing our hamster with at least 6 inches. The cage has a lot of height, which hamsters don't need height. They need floor space and length in their cage so that they have room to run around and everything. So I definitely would recommend upgrading your cage. So the next enclosure here is a 55-gallon aquarium with a Syrian hamster living in it with a Carolina Storm wheel. I think the cage does look pretty good. I like the size of it. I probably would include a little bit more bedding, especially for a Syrian, because they are so big, they do need a lot more bedding depth. And I might add in a bit more toys, but other than that, I think it looks good. So the next cage we have here is a Robo Dwarf hamster who lives in a pink critter trail. I do want to start by saying no critter trail except for the super critter trail is suitable for a hamster. Unfortunately, no matter the species, it just isn't large enough. Robos have a lot of energy, so they are going to need a lot of space to be able to actually properly do all their natural behaviors and run around and get their energy out, rather than just getting their energy out on the wheel. So I would really recommend upgrading your enclosure. You have a very, very adorable hamster though. So this enclosure here is the Proof 528 Universal Small Animal Home, and they have a Syrian who is 2 years old living in it. So I really like all the accessories you made. It even looks like you have a paper mache custom hideout in there, which is really awesome. One thing I do notice is I would fill up the bedding almost to the top of the tray base so that you can provide them with something to burrow in, because once again, burrowing is important for a hamster. So this next cage here I've actually seen before, and I really like the looks of it because it is a very large wooden enclosure. The first thing that I did notice when I looked at the cage is I saw the popsicle sticks as a fence, and immediately it took me back to when Aspen broke her leg, and now I just don't recommend anybody use popsicle sticks as a fence. So if you can maybe use plexiglass or just solid cardboard as a fence, it would be a better idea, because then you can prevent any broken limbs from happening. So the next enclosures that I have to show you, I've actually compiled a lot that I have no suggestions or criticism for, because I think they're doing everything really wonderful and they have really nice cages and just great examples for you guys. So now I'm going to show you those. So the first enclosure we have here is for their Syrian hamster, and it is a handmade acrylic cage. I really like all of the stuff they've included in it. They put a lot of natural things for them to be able to do, like some foraging sprays, as well as a lot of texture in the bedding, a sand bath, just a lot of things for the hamster to do. The next enclosure is a IKEA Dwarf with a Roborowski living in it. I think they've done a really great job. They've put a very large amount of bedding in there, which is great, and they have a lot of different levels and things for the hamster to dig and forage into, so I hope this can give some inspiration to you guys. The next enclosure we have here is another IKEA Dwarf, and I really like this one. There's a lot of different things going on. I really like the hideout, the cork log that's buried under the bedding there, and there's just a lot of stuff for the hamster to do. The next enclosure we have here is a terrarium for a Syrian. It is 100 by 50 centimeters, so it is a good sized cage, and they just have a lot of things going on for the hamster to do. They have a lot of hides and some deep substrate as well. So the next is another IKEA Dwarf. This is a really popular enclosure because it is fairly cheap, and it also provides your hamster with a lot of floor space. But I really like this setup. They've provided a ton of bedding for their hamster to burrow, as well as some different things in the enclosure, like the terracotta pot as a hide, a sand bath, and I think that is some soil in there for them to dig in as well. This next cage is actually a furniture item I think they found for free, and they turned it into a hamster cage. It has 1,800 square inches of floor space, so that is absolutely amazing, and it looks like they've provided a lot of different things in there. A lot of bedding, which is great. This next enclosure is a 40-gallon breeder tank, and they've gone with a natural theme. As you can tell, I'm a very big fan of natural themes because it just provides the hamster with a lot more enrichment. So this cage is a really great way to show that you can provide a natural theme in a smaller enclosure like a 40-gallon aquarium. They've done quite a few different homemade things, like the little homemade popsicle swing is really awesome. So this is another DIY enclosure for their male Roborowski hamster, and they just have a lot of stuff going on, which is great, especially for a Robo who is a lot more timid, so they do like to hide and be able to feel safe. So they've included quite a few things in there for their Robo. So that is it for this video. I hope maybe this video is able to give you some inspiration on what to change on your hamster cages, even if I didn't talk about your hamster cage, or maybe you've seen a cage and got some inspiration from that. I also just want to make a quick side note. I do not think my hamster enclosures are any better than any of the ones in this video today. I actually think some of the enclosures I showed today are 100 times better than mine, so I am in no way saying, hey, my enclosures are better than yours. So thank you for watching. Bye!